right. Call to order the public hearing. Consideration for amended preliminary plan at the Village of Canterwood Farms Residential Conservation Development District as requested by ALM Lake Properties LLC. And at this point, I would invite the applicant to come forward and give us an update on the plan they are requesting that the revisions that they're requesting we approve.
Sure. So I need to say my name for the record.
Name and address for the record.
Jeff Small, 7992 Stillwater Court, Concord Township. Thanks for taking the time for going over their amended change request preliminary plan. So the changes, I'll go through the summary of changes. So on our preliminary plan, we had a sublot between 2 and 3 that was removed and added to Goose Road to preserve the wetland B. All the sublots on Goose Road now have a deeper setback, a minimum of 40 feet per Concord Township, the stipulation that was addressed. Mm-hmm. We're also showing turnaround drives on these lots as well. The sublot between the current sublots between 12 and 13 right now was removed, creating space for detention and the cemetery plus preserving wetland A. With the unknown timing of the removing of the cemetery plus having a burial site on the lot, we decided it would not be ideal if it is located on a lot. So this lot that was in that cul-de-sac on the western side was moved to the eastern side of the clubhouse along Windsor Lane. So all of those lots, 27 through 32, had to be adjusted in order to make that lot fit there. Sublot 1 and sublot 55, we widened those to Goose Road right away, and we created a 30-foot landscape easement. We added on the phasing map, there was a change. We showed sublot 1 as the first phase that we'd like to start as our model house, with the sanitary connection to be made prior to the installation of the remainder of the development. So we're going to get that in there before we start actually the physical development of the improvements inside the subdivision. We're allowed one model lot. The other changes is sublot 23. We needed for the stipulations to show a 15-foot side yard setback, which we accomplished. Sublots 53 through 54 were slightly adjusted to preserve additional wetland space. The clubhouse was minorly adjusted, but all the setbacks for the pool requirements are still maintained. So overall, the development's open space actually increased slightly in acreage, but still stayed at the same percentage of 36%. So all of the modifications reduced the total wetland disturbance 0.13 acres, which is the main purpose of the RCD, to conserve impacts to wetlands. So a couple other small adjustments were typical roadway section was updated to address the county comments, and then utilities were changed or added and adjusted based on the lot changes. So those were a summary of our changes.
Okay, is there any questions from the board?
No.
Okay. Then I think as there's no questions, I do see we have some folks in the audience, so being a public hearing, I will ask if anyone wants to come forward and speak. Being as there's not, I'll just call people up one at a time that would like to speak.
Sure.
And we'll take the comments as they come. So if there's anybody here that'd like to speak, if you'd come forward and then state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Chairman, Frank Schindler, 7396 Brunel Drive. I'm a resident, plus also a member of the zoning commission. But I'm just here tonight not representing the zoning commission, but myself. I understand there's been several changes done since the time it left our board. Were these changes made on the request of the trustees, on the benefit of conservation zoning, or was it made by the developer strictly to put in maybe more units on the land in question?
The board did not request these changes.
So was something that the developer was trying to address on his own by reason of preserving more of the land, or just by putting in a couple more units?
I think I would have the developer answer the question. Jeff, do you want to take that, or?
I'm thinking it's
Sure. You want me to come up here?
Yeah, if you would, so we can catch on.
Make sure I understand. I couldn't really hear the question. What was the question?
The question was, what was the purpose of the change? And the question was are the changes being proposed to add more houses?
Oh, no, the units are totally, we haven't changed the amount of units.
still
at all.
59.
Yep.
So we just, it was mostly because of the cemetery, and in hindsight, probably should have done a little sooner, and also preserve some wetlands, so while we were at it, we made some other changes and modifications to improve the plan. So basically, that was why we did it.
Okay. Thank you.
So, in open space, we actually have a little bit more.
Okay.
Nothing significant, but we're at the same.
But the number of lots hasn't changed.
Number of
It's always
lots
been
hasn't changed.
still 59.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Mr. Schindler?
Secondly, one of my biggest concerns was when it came about our board was there was still no decision on the cemetery. And I have some deep concerns about that.
Okay.
I would hope the developer would take under consideration of doing something to take care of that, either by cleaning it up and making it a place where to still be honoring the people who are living, or not living, but buried there. If there can be some consideration, like I say, cleaning it up, maybe based on the maybe homeowners association, where they would take care of it, and maybe isolate in such a way, maybe a nice little picket fence around it where people could understand that it's a burial site and it does reserve some respect. So I would hope that the developer would definitely take consideration of that area and not to disturb it in any way at all. Because I know there was talk about possibly moving it, and based on the photographs I have seen, I would think basically it would be somewhat difficult with the large tree that's there that's grown up over most of it over the years. I understand that by looking at the photos also, even some of the tombstones are somewhat even part of the tree now. So trying to take those out and remove them, I think would be very difficult. So if we can show some respect in that area by the developer, I would deeply appreciate that consideration.
Thank you.
I thank you.
Is there any other residents here this evening who would like to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, I would just invite the developer back up if they had any additional comments or further answers regarding the cemetery. Not obligated, just offering the opportunity.
Did have comments about the cemetery?
I'd just like to give you the opportunity to address it if you'd
Yeah,
like.
it is our hope at some point to have this re-interned in a more suitable location. I think I heard Mr. Schindler saying something about one of them. The only standing existing monument, which is unidentifiable, is entombed in a tree and bent over. Everything else is in fragments, so it's been abandoned for apparently well over 100 years. We still have to work that out, but in the interest of turning around and making sure that we have a viable project to take forward, we're just now, we're excluding it and not putting a lot, which would have been a very desirable lot location. We decided not to put it there. So again, we haven't done anything legally with this. We haven't
Right.
pursued it to that point where our main objective now is to
Just get a project.
move forward, get going, and then hopefully we can address it, and hopefully with the trustees at some point.
Okay.
Can you address how you plan to restore that if you do move it, the open space there?
How we plan to restore the cemetery?
Well, if you're gonna move the cemetery, what you're gonna do with that open space?
Yeah, it would be planned in some, assuming we were to, you want to make an assumption that the cemetery would be moved at some point?
Well, either or. So if it wasn't moved, could it be, you know, a historical site conserved?
If you take a look at it, it looks like a mess. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know, I think you may have, or you may not, may have seen pictures of it.
Right.
Right.
Honestly, I don't know, it's abandoned. We don't have any finalized plan that we could even bring to the front right now to do with it. Okay, so as it sits right now, it's called a cemetery, but it actually is honestly, it's a disgrace to the people that were originally buried there. I don't know anybody want to have their family or descendants if they saw it in that kind of circumstance. So I believe we would, if we come to some conclusion that's amicable and can be worked out in order to have this done in a responsible manner. And we're happy to turn around and work with the trustees or whoever to make sure it's a nice area potentially.
If, and just for, maybe just to clarify then, for, if you're not able to, if it's not able to be moved, and I know you don't have plans, but what is the intention of the space? And just what would you do if you couldn't move it late?
You know, I think I have to cross that bridge when I come to it. We have not really given that consideration at this point. Do you have suggestions?
I,
I mean, essentially, we're hoping it moves. If it does, we'd want to restore it in some kind of a, you know, something that look good. Right now, it's overrun with poison ivy, poison oak, according to the owners of the property. She went back to look at it. Poison ivy, poison. It's in total disarray. And it's a real mess. So that's kind of what's existing there now. I have not walked on it.
right.
But having the owner, that's what she described in walking through there. The fence, I think that her father originally put up when they bought the property is all broken down by trees falling on it.
Right.
It's really a mess.
I guess I asked the question understanding, and I'll defer or ask Mr. Lucas just to confirm that it's really it's not up to us whether that happens. It has to go through the legal process. So if it's determined and the ability to move it is not granted and it's stuck there, I assume because you're building houses on the other side of it, there'd be some attempt to make it, you're gonna have houses on either side of it, so you'd have to do something to make it palatable to those people living in adjacent lots.
Well, we're gonna have the homeowners living on either side of it, so
Right.
we'll have to do something at some point. I'm not sure what will be done.
So it's either gonna get cleaned up to some extent or moved, one way or the other. That's really what
Yeah,
you're
maybe the homeowners, I'll tell you, I think the homeowners there might recognize the fact it looks like a bunch of scattered rocks on the ground at this point. So it's
Well,
not-
I understand, but I mean, again, there's a legal process to it being moved, which none of us necessarily have control over. That's correct, Mr. Lucas?
That's correct.
So that being the case, you could end up getting stuck with it of not due to anything we do or do not do.
I don't
is
know,
what
I
I'm saying.
think that someone one time mentioned that some distant relatives wanted to see it remain, maybe they'd be interested in maintaining it.
Right.
I'm not sure. Is there a family?
I guess the question or the point I'm making is that you're going to be selling a product on either side of it, so you have some interest if it's not moved to make it presentable. Based on the fact that you're going to sell houses on either side of it, so some portion of it is going to
Yeah,
get.
and I think this new plat we have certainly takes a better account than having it in the middle of what would have been a lot.
Yep, right, I agree.
Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, what would be the plan then so I still feel like we need to have some clarification on what would be the
If
plan.
it were to
with
be
the-
moved,
What would be the plan
if
with
it were to be
the,
moved,
what would be the plan with the open space if it wasn't moved?
if it were to be moved,
If it wasn't?
I'm not sure what the plan might be. I mean, I'm not sure what I could do that it would be there's a bunch of rocks there. Should we gather in a pile? I'm not sure. So, I mean, I'm open to suggesting if it gets to that point.
Okay, and then if it was moved, I feel like we still need
Yeah, I think if it
clarification
were
on what.
moved, we would probably put some kind of a native kind of a planting, maybe something nicer. Perhaps even put up a plaque as a memorial, potentially, if it gets moved. Again, but I don't necessarily want to get to that point, conjecture what we might do. I mean, I think we passed some plat already with the cemetery, not a lot on the cemetery originally, so I think we made the first step of not having a lot on the existing cemeteries. And I think, is there a landscape you can work with there?
It's a landscape easement.
There's a landscape easement put on that, and again, as Judge said, we will be above the 30% requirement. We gotta, we will not wanna leave it full of poison ivy. I don't think either neighbor would wanna have poison ivy coming in their yards either, so. Okay. Anything else?
Did I answer your question?
Hopefully I answered your question.
Well, I mean, I
Again,
just-
I don't wanna make a promise, I don't know, I'm not sure what
Well,
the
we-
outcome.
Well, I think if we're gonna move to possibly approve this tonight, that we
We-
might have to have some type of stipulation.
Some type of assurance
Assurance
that the
that-
open space
that
will be.
that the cemetery, one way or another, whether
So
or not.
I think what I'm hearing you say, and I think what Mr. Small said, and what was that there's a landscape easement on it, so if it's not moved, there's some level of maintenance that would
Something-
occur.
Something will be done there.
And if you move it, you're going to treat it like open space,
Right.
and native planting would return. Is
That's-
that what I'm
That's the
hearing?
intention.
Okay,
That would
so
be-
one way or the other, there is some kind of a plan to manage that space, which is our concern.
Right.
You're addressing both of those conditions, and I recounted that accurately. Is that fair to say?
So what you're saying is if it is moved, then we would put a native plant.
You're telling me that
If
you're,
not moved, then it'll be cleaned up.
Somewhat.
It would have to be cleaned up, I think.
to-
I'm not sure exactly what kind of cleanup you do.
I understand.
With rocks that are, headstones that are scattered.
Right.
You know, so, okay.
all right. Is that-
But I guess, just to clarify, because in the court, I mean, this is something that's gonna be looked at later through the court system, as far as this
Right.
cemetery. I mean, if we approve this plan, I mean, obviously, we don't know what's gonna transpire when you go to look at how it's gonna be remedied, or whether or not it's gonna be moved, or it has to be left there.
Do you think,
So I
this-
think,
but do you think this is, actually, I don't want is this preferable than having a cemetery on a lot, which we already approved?
I don't.
Fine.
Well, I don't think that's the point.
No,
that's
that's
not
not-
the point we're making.
No.
Or that's not the questions being raised. I would absolutely agree
this plan is
that this
much
is
better.
Yes, that you're taking. What we're trying to say is, tell us what you're going to do, one way or the other. What I'm in my view of this is, you're going to sell two houses on either side of this thing. So you, as the developer, have an interest to clean it up, and if you can't move it, if the courts don't allow you to do that, you're going to need to clean it to some degree, because people are going to want to buy houses next to nothing that's. And Mr. Smalls did say landscaping easement. That's what I heard. What you told Mrs. Lucci also was that if you end up moving it, you're going to return it to
Right, it would be.
native,
some kind
like
of-
like the rest of the open space.
Something
is
something to
being
be pleasant looking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there any discussion or anything on this before we?
No, I will say, you know, in looking at the new proposed plan, I know there was another plan that was proposed. I do like the modifications that were made on this plan, especially regarding the lots that were originally sort of outside of the development over on Morley Road. I think this is much more contained and looks, you know, looks much better as far as the modifications that were made.
Yeah, I think from the first plan that was approved by zoning commission and trustees, looking at the differences here, I appreciate the area where the cemetery is, creating that either open space or allowing for whatever is going to happen with that cemetery. Other than that, I think it's pretty close to that first plan.
Yeah, I think, to Mr. Reeby's point, I think this does a better job of addressing the flexibility of whatever happens with that cemetery or abandoned cemeteries. It gives them flexibility to treat it one way or the other. I appreciate the opportunity for it to become part of the development. If it has to stay, he's accounted for that. I think the rest of this is very close to what we already approved, and in fact accommodated some of the things we discussed when we did approve it. So I think it's reasonable changes. So. Okay, with that, I would take a motion to close the public hearing. Hearing no other comments.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and none opposed. Okay, and with that, we will adjourn until 7:30 for the start of the regular trustee.